The morning sun shone through the tall windows of the Birmingham Municipal Court building. Judge Harrison Williams walked into his courtroom with heavy steps. He was tired before the day even started. His coffee was cold and he had already looked at his schedule. 37 cases to hear before lunch. He shook his head and sat down in his big leather chair behind the bench. Judge Williams was 48 years old. He had been a judge for 12 years. He thought he had seen everything in his courtroom. Drug cases, traffic tickets, small fights between neighbors. Most days felt the same to him. He wanted to get through each case as fast as possible so he could go home to his big house in the suburbs. The courtroom started to fill up with people. Some wore suits and ties. Others wore old clothes and looked nervous. Judge Williams looked at them all with the same bored expression. He tapped his pen on his desk and waited for the first case to be called. The court clerk, a thin woman named Mrs. Peterson, stood up. She had worked in the courthouse for 20 years. She knew how Judge Williams could get when he was in a bad mood. Today seemed like one of those days. "The court will now come to order," Mrs. Peterson said in a loud voice. "The Honorable Judge Harrison Williams presiding." Judge Williams looked at his papers. The first few cases went by quickly. A man who didn't pay his car registration. A woman who got caught speeding. A teenager who was caught shoplifting candy. The judge gave them all fines and moved on to the next case. Then Mrs. Peterson called out, "Dorothy Mae Jackson versus the City of Birmingham. Parking violation." An old woman stood up slowly from a bench in the back of the courtroom. She was 78 years old, but she looked even older today. Her back was bent from years of hard work. She wore a simple blue dress with small white flowers on it. The dress was clean but old. Her black shoes were worn but polished. She carried a brown handbag that had seen better days. Dorothy Mae Jackson walked slowly toward the front of the courtroom. Her steps were careful and small. She used a wooden cane to help her walk. The cane made small tapping sounds on the floor. Everyone in the courtroom could hear it. Judge Williams looked up from his papers. When he saw the old woman walking toward him, he made a face like he had tasted something bad. He looked at his watch and then back at his papers. He did not like what he saw. Dorothy Mae finally reached the table in front of the judge's bench. She stood there quietly and waited. She kept her back as straight as she could. Her hands held her purse and her cane. She looked directly at Judge Williams with clear, bright eyes. "Ma'am," Judge Williams said without looking up, "you're here about a parking ticket. Is that right?" "Yes, Your Honor," Dorothy Mae said. Her voice was soft but clear. "I received a ticket last Tuesday. I believe there was a mistake." Judge Williams finally looked at her. He saw an old black woman who probably didn't have much education. At least that's what he thought. He had made up his mind about her before she even spoke. "A mistake?" Judge Williams said. He sounded like he didn't believe her. "Let me guess. You think the parking meter was broken, or maybe you think you had more time left." "They all say the same thing." Dorothy Mae stood quietly. She had heard this tone of voice many times before in her life. She knew what it meant. But she also knew she had to stay calm and respectful. "No, Your Honor," she said. "I was parked in a legal spot. I was attending a community meeting at the library. The meeting was about helping elderly people understand their voting rights." Judge Williams rolled his eyes. He picked up the ticket and looked at it for the first time. "Says here you were parked in a no parking zone on 5th Street, right in front of the library." "Your Honor, if I may explain," Dorothy Mae began. "Lady, listen." Judge Williams interrupted her. He spoke louder now. "I don't have time for long stories. You either parked illegally or you didn't. The police officer says you did." "Are you calling him a liar?" Dorothy Mae took a deep breath. "I'm not calling anyone a liar, Your Honor. I'm just saying that I was parked in a legal spot. There was no sign that said no parking." Judge Williams laughed, but it wasn't a nice laugh. "Oh, so now you're saying the city put up a fake ticket? Is that it?" Some people in the courtroom started to feel uncomfortable. A young man sitting in the back row shifted in his seat. He was Marcus Thompson, a law student who worked as an intern in the courthouse. He had been watching the whole thing. Something about the way the judge was treating the old woman didn't feel right. Mrs. Peterson, the court clerk, also looked uncomfortable. She had seen Judge Williams be rude before, but this seemed worse than usual. Dorothy Mae remained calm. "Your Honor, I've been driving for 50 years. I've never had a parking ticket before. I'm very careful about where I park. I made sure to look for signs before I left my car." 50 years? Judge Williams said with a smirk. Well, maybe it's time you stopped driving then. Maybe your eyes aren't so good anymore. Maybe you didn't see the sign. Dorothy May felt the words hit her like a slap. But she had felt worse things in her life. Much worse. She kept standing straight and looked directly at the judge. My eyes are fine, Your Honor, she said quietly. I see very well. Judge Williams was getting more annoyed. This old woman was taking up too much of his time. He wanted her gone so he could move on to the next case. Look, lady, he said, I don't know what kind of games you people like to play, but this is my courtroom. You got a ticket. You broke the law. Just pay the fine and go home. Don't waste my time with your stories. The words you people hung in the air like a bad smell. Everyone in the courtroom heard them. Marcus Thompson sat up straighter in his seat. Mrs. Peterson looked down at her papers. Other people in the courtroom looked at each other with worried faces. Dorothy May heard the words too. She had heard them before, many times, in many places, but hearing them in a courtroom from a judge still hurt, still made her heart heavy. But Dorothy May Jackson was not the kind of woman who gave up easily. She had not given up when things were much harder than this. She was not going to give up now. Your Honor, she said, her voice still soft but stronger now, I would like to present my case. I have the right to explain what happened. Judge Williams looked at her like she had said something crazy. Your case? Lady, this is a $25 parking ticket. What case? You pay it or you don't. That's it. I understand it's only $25, Dorothy May said. But it's not about the money. It's about what's right. And what's right is that I was parked legally. Judge Williams slammed his hand on his desk. The sound made everyone jump. I've heard enough, he said loudly. Judge Williams stared at Dorothy May with angry eyes. The sound of his hand hitting the desk still echoed in the quiet courtroom. Everyone was looking at him now. He didn't like being challenged, especially not by an old woman who he thought should just pay her fine and leave. I said I've heard enough, Judge Williams repeated. His voice was loud and sharp. You people always think you know better than the law. You think you can come into my courtroom and argue about everything? Dorothy May stood perfectly still. She kept her hands folded over her purse and cane. Her face showed no anger even though she felt hurt by his words. She had learned long ago that showing anger would only make things worse. Your Honor, she said in the same calm voice, I'm not arguing. I'm just trying to explain what happened. Isn't that what court is for? Judge Williams made a sound like he was frustrated. Court is for people who understand how things work. It's not for people who want to waste time with silly stories. Marcus Thompson, the young law student in the back, felt his stomach twist. He had been studying law for 3 years. He knew that everyone had the right to tell their side of the story in court. That was basic law. What the judge was doing was wrong. Marcus looked around the courtroom. Other people were watching too. Some looked shocked. Others looked scared. A few people were recording with their phones, but they were trying to hide it. Mrs. Peterson, the court clerk, cleared her throat softly. Your Honor, she said carefully, perhaps we should hear what Mrs. Jackson has to say. Judge Williams turned his angry look toward Mrs. Peterson. Mrs. Peterson, I decide how to run my courtroom. Not you. Mrs. Peterson's face turned red. She looked down at her papers and said nothing more. Dorothy May took a small step forward. Your Honor, may I please show you something? Judge Williams rolled his eyes again. What now? You got some magic paper that's going to change everything? Dorothy May reached into her purse slowly. She pulled out a small camera. It was old, but it worked. I took pictures of where I parked. I always do that now when I go somewhere important. Just to be safe. Judge Williams looked at the camera like it was something dirty. Pictures? You think I'm going to look at pictures from some old camera? How do I know when you took them? How do I know where you took them? The camera shows the date and time, Dorothy May said patiently. And you can see the street signs in the pictures. I don't have time for this, Judge Williams said. He waved his hand in the air like he was brushing away a fly. I'm not looking at pictures. The police officer wrote the ticket. That's enough for me. Dorothy May felt her heart sink a little, but she didn't give up. Your Honor, don't I have the right to defend myself? Judge Williams laughed again. It was a mean laugh. Defend yourself? This isn't a murder trial, lady. It's a parking ticket. You're acting like this is the most important thing in the world. It is important, Dorothy May said quietly. When someone says you did something wrong and you didn't do it, that's always important. The judge looked at his watch. He was getting more impatient. Listen, I've got 30 more cases to get through today. I can't spend all day on one old woman who doesn't want to pay a $25 fine. Marcus Thompson couldn't stay quiet anymore. He raised his hand. Your Honor? Judge Williams looked at him with surprise.
What? Who are you?
I'm Marcus Thompson, sir. I'm a law student intern here at the courthouse.
Well, Mr. Thompson, unless you're representing this woman, sit down and be quiet.
Marcus felt his heart beating fast. He knew he could get in trouble. But he also knew what was happening wasn't right. Your Honor, I think Mrs. Jackson should be allowed to present her evidence. Judge Williams' face turned red. Mr. Thompson, you're here to watch and learn, not to tell me how to do my job. Sit down now or you can leave. Marcus sat down, but he didn't stop watching. He pulled out his phone and started taking notes about what he was seeing. Dorothy May looked back at Marcus and gave him a small, grateful smile. Then she turned back to Judge Williams. Your Honor, she said, I've been coming to this courthouse for many years. I've never caused any trouble. I just want you to look at my pictures. It will only take a minute. Judge Williams shook his head. Years? What do you mean years? Why would you be coming here for years? I've been helping people with legal problems, Dorothy May said. Helping them understand their rights. Helping them fill out forms. That kind of thing. Judge Williams's eyes got narrow. Oh, I see. You're one of those troublemakers. One of those people who goes around telling others to fight the system. Dorothy May's back got straighter. I help people understand their rights. That's not making trouble. That's helping people. Same thing, Judge Williams said. You people are always looking for something to complain about. Always trying to cause problems where there aren't any. Mrs. Peterson looked up from her papers. She had heard enough. Your Honor, perhaps we should take a short break. No breaks, Judge Williams said firmly. We're finishing this now. Dorothy May took another small step forward. Your Honor, I served on a jury in this very courthouse 5 years ago. The judge then said that everyone deserves to have their voice heard. Don't I deserve the same thing? Judge Williams slammed his hand on the desk again. This time it was louder. Don't you tell me what other judges said. I'm the judge here now. Some people in the courtroom jumped when he hit the desk. A woman in the front row grabbed her husband's arm. The man sitting next to her looked angry. Your Honor, Dorothy May said, still calm. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just asking for fairness. Fairness? Judge Williams said. He stood up now. You want to talk about fairness? I'll tell you what's fair. What's fair is that you follow the law. What's fair is that you don't waste the court's time. What's fair is that you pay your fine and go home. Dorothy May looked up at him. Even though he was standing and she was small, she didn't look scared. What's fair is that you listen to what I have to say. Judge Williams pointed his finger at her. I've listened enough. You parked illegally. You got a ticket. End of story. But I have pictures, Dorothy May said again. I don't care about your pictures, Judge Williams shouted. His voice was so loud that everyone in the courtroom could hear it clearly. I don't care what you think happened. I don't care what you want to show me. The courtroom was completely quiet now. Everyone was staring at Judge Williams. Even the security guard by the door was watching with wide eyes. Dorothy May stood there for a long moment. She looked at Judge Williams with sad but strong eyes. She had seen this kind of anger before. She had faced this kind of treatment before. But it still hurt. It always hurt, Your Honor, she said very quietly. I just want to be treated with respect. Judge Williams sat back down. Respect? You want respect? Then respect my courtroom. Respect the law. Pay your fine. Dorothy May nodded slowly. She understood now that this judge was not going to listen to her. No matter what she said. No matter what pictures she had. He had already made up his mind about who she was and what she deserved. But Dorothy May Jackson had not lived 78 years by giving up when things got hard. She had faced much worse than this angry judge. And she was not going to stop fighting for what was right. Your Honor, she said, I would like to request that my case be moved to another court. Judge Williams looked shocked. What, you can't do that. This is where your case belongs. I believe I have the right to request a different judge if I feel I'm not being treated fairly. Judge Williams' face got even redder. You're not going anywhere. We're settling this right here, right now. Dorothy May Jackson stood quietly in front of Judge Williams. The courtroom was so silent that people could hear the air conditioning humming in the background. Everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. The old woman had just asked for a different judge. Nobody had expected that. Judge Williams stared at Dorothy May with disbelief. In all his years as a judge, no one had ever questioned his authority so directly, especially not an elderly black woman with a parking ticket. He felt embarrassed and angry that everyone in the courtroom had heard her request. "Mrs. Jackson," Judge Williams said, trying to control his voice, "you cannot just demand a different judge because you don't like what I'm telling you. That's not how the law works." Dorothy May kept her eyes on his face. "Your Honor, I'm not asking for a different judge because I don't like what you're saying. I'm asking because I don't feel I'm getting a fair hearing." "Fair?" Judge Williams said. The word came out louder than he meant it to. "I've been more than fair with you. I've listened to your complaints. I've given you time to speak. What more do you want?" Dorothy May adjusted her grip on her cane. Her hands were steady, but inside she felt tired. Not from standing, but from having to fight for something so simple. The right to be heard. The right to be treated with dignity. "Your Honor," she said, "you haven't looked at my evidence. You haven't asked me any questions about what really happened. You've already decided I'm guilty before hearing my side." Marcus Thompson was writing everything down on his phone. He had never seen anything like this in his 3 years of studying law. He knew the old woman was right. Every person had the right to present their case, no matter how small it was. Mrs. Peterson, the court clerk, was also uncomfortable. She had worked in this courthouse for 20 years. She had seen judges lose their temper before. But this felt different. This felt wrong. "Mrs. Jackson," Mrs. Peterson said carefully, "perhaps you could show the court your photographs now." Judge Williams turned to look at Mrs. Peterson with angry eyes. "Mrs. Peterson, I decide what evidence gets presented in my courtroom. Not you." "Yes, Your Honor," Mrs. Peterson said quietly. She looked down at her papers, but her face showed that she disagreed with him. Dorothy May reached into her purse again and pulled out the small camera. "Your Honor, these pictures will only take a minute to look at. They show exactly where I was parked. They show there was no parking sign." Judge Williams waved his hand in the air like he was swatting at a bug. "I told you already. I'm not looking at pictures from some old camera. How do I know you didn't take them somewhere else? How do I know you didn't take them on a different day?" Dorothy May opened the camera and looked at the small screen on the back. "The camera puts the date and time on every picture, Your Honor. And you can see the street signs. You can see the library in the background." "I don't care what's on those pictures," Judge Williams said. "The police officer wrote you a ticket. Police officers are trained to know where people can and cannot park." "Are you saying you know better than a trained police officer?" Dorothy May took a slow breath. "I'm not saying I know better than anyone, Your Honor. I'm saying that maybe the officer made a mistake. People make mistakes sometimes." Judge Williams laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Oh, so now it's the police officer's fault. First you want a different judge. Now you're saying the police are wrong. What's next? Are you going to tell me the parking meters are broken too?" Some people in the courtroom started to whisper to each other. They couldn't believe what they were hearing. An old woman was just trying to show pictures of where she parked. And the judge was acting like she was asking for something impossible. Dorothy May heard the whispers, but she kept her attention on Judge Williams. "Your Honor, I'm not blaming anyone. I'm just trying to show you what really happened." "What really happened," Judge Williams said, "is that you parked where you weren't supposed to park. What really happened is that you got caught. What really happened is that now you're trying to get out of paying the fine." Dorothy May shook her head slowly. "Your Honor, this isn't about the money. $25 won't hurt me. This is about the truth." Judge Williams rolled his eyes. "The truth?" "The truth is on this ticket." He held up the paper. "Officer James Martinez wrote this ticket at 2:30 in the afternoon on Tuesday. He said you were parked in a no parking zone. That's the truth. But if you would just look at my pictures," Dorothy May said, "you would see that Officer Martinez made an honest mistake." "I'm not looking at your pictures," Judge Williams shouted. His voice was so loud that it echoed off the walls of the courtroom. "I don't need to look at pictures. I don't need to hear your stories. I have the police report. That's enough." Dorothy May didn't step back, even though the judge was shouting at her. She had heard much worse than shouting in her life. She had faced much scarier people than Judge Williams. "Your Honor, she said in the same calm voice she had been using all morning. Every person who comes to court deserves to have their evidence looked at. That's what my grandson learned in school. That's what America is supposed to be about. Judge Williams's face turned red again. Don't you lecture me about America. Don't you tell me what this country is about? I've been a judge for 12 years. And I've been an American for 78 years, Dorothy May said quietly. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Judge Williams stared at her. He hadn't expected her to talk back to him like that. Most people who came to his court were scared of him. They paid their fines and left quickly. This old woman was different. Marcus Thompson stopped writing on his phone and looked up. There was something about the way Dorothy May had said those words. Something about the strength in her voice. Something about the way she held herself. It reminded him of someone, but he couldn't think of who. Your Honor, Dorothy May continued, I've been voting in elections since 1965. I've served on juries. I've paid my taxes. I've never been in trouble with the law. I think I deserve to be treated with respect. Judge Williams pointed his finger at her again. Respect? You think arguing with a judge is respectful? You think questioning police officers is respectful? You think wasting the court's time is respectful? Dorothy May looked directly into his eyes. I think standing up for what's right is respectful. I think telling the truth is respectful. I think treating all people fairly is respectful. All people? Judge Williams said. What's that supposed to mean? Dorothy May didn't answer right away. She looked around the courtroom. She saw Marcus Thompson watching her carefully. She saw Mrs. Peterson looking uncomfortable. She saw other people in the room who were paying attention to every word. It means that everyone who comes to this court should be treated the same way, Dorothy May finally said. Rich or poor, young or old, black or white, everyone deserves a fair hearing. Judge Williams felt like the old woman was trying to make him look bad in front of everyone. Are you saying I don't treat people fairly? Are you accusing me of something? Dorothy May shook her head. I'm not accusing you of anything, Your Honor. I'm just asking you to treat me fairly, to look at my evidence, to listen to what I have to say. I've been listening, Judge Williams said loudly. No, Dorothy May said softly. You've been waiting for me to stop talking. That's not the same thing as listening. The courtroom was quiet again. Everyone was thinking about what Dorothy May had just said. Even Judge Williams stopped talking for a moment. Marcus Thompson felt his heart beating faster. He was starting to remember where he had heard words like that before. In his civil rights history class, in books about the 1960s, in documentaries about people who fought for equality. Dorothy May reached into her purse and pulled out a piece of paper. It was old and folded many times. Your Honor, I have something else I'd like to show you. Judge Williams looked at the paper suspiciously. What is that? It's a letter, Dorothy May said. From the Birmingham Police Department. From 1963, Judge Williams frowned. 1963? What does something from 1963 have to do with a parking ticket from last week? Dorothy May unfolded the paper carefully. It was yellow with age and the words were faded. This letter apologized to me for something that happened when I was younger. When police officers treated me badly because of the color of my skin. The courtroom got very quiet. People leaned forward to hear better. It says that all people deserve to be treated with dignity and respect, Dorothy May continued. It says that the police department was sorry for the way things used to be. It says they promised to do better. Judge Williams stared at the old paper. What does that have to do with anything? Dorothy May folded the letter back up and put it in her purse. It means that I've been fighting for fairness for a long time, Your Honor, and I'm not going to stop now. Marcus Thompson sat in the back row of the courtroom, staring at Dorothy May Jackson. Something about her was very familiar. The way she spoke. The way she held herself so straight even when the judge was yelling at her. The way she talked about fighting for fairness. It reminded him of something from his studies. During law school, Marcus had taken several classes about civil rights history. He had read many books about the brave people who fought for equality in the 1960s. He had seen pictures and videos of protesters who faced angry police officers and mean judges. Something about Dorothy May reminded him of those old pictures. Judge Williams was still arguing with Dorothy May about the letter from 1963. He was saying it had nothing to do with her parking ticket. But Marcus wasn't listening to the judge anymore. He was trying to remember where he had seen Dorothy May before. Marcus pulled out his phone and started searching quietly. He typed Dorothy Mae Jackson Birmingham Civil Rights into the search box. He had to be careful so the judge wouldn't see him using his phone during court. The first search result made Marcus's eyes grow wide. There was a picture of a young woman being arrested outside a bus station in 1965. The woman was being pulled away by 2 police officers, but she held her head high. She looked strong and proud even though she was in trouble. The name under the picture said Dorothy Mae Jackson, age 22, arrested for refusing to leave whites-only waiting area at Birmingham bus station. Marcus looked up at the old woman standing in front of Judge Williams. Then he looked back at his phone. The young woman in the picture had the same strong eyes, the same way of holding her chin up, the same look of quiet strength. Marcus kept searching. He found more pictures. Dorothy Mae Jackson marching with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Dorothy Mae Jackson registering people to vote. Dorothy Mae Jackson speaking at a church meeting about civil rights. Marcus felt his heart beating faster. The old woman that Judge Williams was treating so badly wasn't just any old woman. She was Dorothy Mae Jackson, one of the most important civil rights leaders in Birmingham's history. Marcus read more on his phone. Dorothy Mae Jackson had been arrested 17 times for fighting for civil rights. She had helped organize the bus boycotts that changed the law. She had registered thousands of black people to vote when it was dangerous to do that work. She had worked directly with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and other famous civil rights leaders. The phone showed that Dorothy Mae Jackson had received many awards for her work. She had been honored by 3 different presidents. She had spoken to Congress about voting rights. She had been featured in history books and documentaries. But the most amazing thing Marcus read was that Dorothy Mae Jackson was still alive and still living in Birmingham. The article said she was 78 years old and still helping people in her community. Marcus looked up from his phone. The woman standing in front of Judge Williams was 78 years old. She lived in Birmingham. She helped people with legal problems. It all fit together. Marcus felt sick to his stomach. Judge Williams was being rude and disrespectful to one of the most important people in Birmingham's history. A woman who had risked her life to make things better for everyone. A woman who had helped change America. Marcus wanted to stand up and tell Judge Williams who Dorothy Mae really was. But he was scared. He was just a law student. If he interrupted the court again, he might get kicked out of his internship. He might get in trouble at school. But Marcus also knew that what was happening was wrong. Very wrong. Dorothy Mae Jackson deserved better than this. She deserved respect. She deserved to be listened to. Judge Williams was still talking loudly. Mrs. Jackson, I don't want to hear any more stories about the past. We're here to talk about your parking ticket, not about things that happened 60 years ago. Dorothy Mae stood quietly and listened. She didn't look angry, even though the judge was being mean to her. She just looked tired of having to fight for respect. Tired of having to prove she was worth listening to. Your Honor, Dorothy Mae said, the past and the present are connected. The way people treat each other matters, whether it's 1963 or today. Judge Williams rolled his eyes. That's enough philosophy for one day. Are you going to pay this fine or not? Marcus couldn't stay quiet anymore. He knew he might get in trouble, but he couldn't watch this happen. He raised his hand again. Your Honor, Marcus said, standing up. Judge Williams looked at him with angry eyes. Mr. Thompson, I already told you to sit down and be quiet. Your Honor, I think there's something you should know, Marcus said. His voice was shaking a little, but he kept talking. The only thing I need to know is why you keep interrupting my court, Judge Williams said. Marcus took a deep breath. Your Honor, I think you should know who Mrs. Jackson is. Dorothy Mae turned around to look at Marcus. She looked surprised. She wasn't used to young people standing up for her, especially in a courtroom. I know who she is, Judge Williams said. She's someone who got a parking ticket and doesn't want to pay it. Marcus felt his hands shaking, but he kept going. Your Honor, Mrs. Jackson is a civil rights hero. She worked with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. She helped change the laws in Birmingham. She's one of the most important people in this city's history. Judge Williams stared at Marcus like he had said something crazy. What are you talking about? Marcus held up his phone. I just looked her up, Your Honor. Dorothy Mae Jackson was one of the main organizers of the civil rights movement in Birmingham. She's been honored by presidents. She's in history books. The courtroom got very quiet. Everyone was looking back and forth between Marcus, Judge Williams, and Dorothy Mae. Dorothy May looked embarrassed. She didn't like being the center of attention. She had never been comfortable when people talked about the things she had done in the past. She just did what she thought was right. "Young man," Dorothy May said softly to Marcus, "you don't need to say those things. I'm just here about a parking ticket," but Marcus kept talking. "Mrs. Jackson, you're being too modest. Your Honor, this woman risked her life to make Birmingham a better place. She was arrested over and over again for fighting for equality. She helped register thousands of people to vote." Judge Williams looked confused. He looked at Dorothy May, then at Marcus, then back at Dorothy May. "Is this true?" Dorothy May nodded slowly. "I did some work for civil rights when I was younger, but that was a long time ago." "A long time ago?" Marcus said. "Mrs. Jackson, you're still doing that work. The article says you still help people understand their rights. You still help people with legal problems." Mrs. Peterson, the court clerk, was also looking at her computer now. She was searching for information about Dorothy May Jackson. Her eyes got wide when she saw what came up on her screen. "Your Honor," Mrs. Peterson said quietly, "I think the young man is right. There are many articles about Dorothy May Jackson online. She received the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2015. Judge Williams felt his stomach drop. The Presidential Medal of Freedom was one of the highest honors in America. It was given to people who had made extraordinary contributions to the country. Judge Williams looked at Dorothy May with new eyes. She was still standing in the same position, holding her purse and her cane, but now he was starting to understand that she wasn't just any old woman with a parking ticket. "Mrs. Jackson," Judge Williams said, and his voice was different now, "is it true that you worked with Dr. King?" Dorothy May nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. I worked with Dr. King and many other people who believed in equality and justice." Judge Williams felt his face getting hot. He was starting to realize that he had been very rude to someone very important, someone who had done more for Birmingham than he ever would. Marcus sat back down, but he kept watching. He could see that Judge Williams was beginning to understand what had just happened. "Mrs. Jackson," Judge Williams said slowly, "why didn't you tell me who you were?" Dorothy May looked at him with sad eyes. "Your Honor, I shouldn't have to tell you who I am to be treated with respect. Every person who comes to your court should be treated fairly, whether they're famous or not." Judge Williams felt worse and worse. Everything Dorothy May had said was right. Every person did deserve to be treated fairly, and he had not been fair to her. Not at all. Judge Williams sat behind his desk feeling like the world had just changed around him. His mouth felt dry and his hands were starting to shake a little. He looked at Dorothy May Jackson standing in front of him, and for the first time that morning he really saw her. This wasn't just an old woman trying to get out of paying a parking ticket. This was Dorothy May Jackson, a woman whose name was in history books, a woman who had changed America, a woman he had just spent the last 20 minutes treating badly in front of a room full of people. Marcus Thompson was still standing in the back of the courtroom. He was searching for more information on his phone. What he was finding made him feel even more amazed and more upset about what he had just witnessed. "Your Honor," Marcus said, "may I read something from the internet about Mrs. Jackson?" Judge Williams nodded slowly. He wasn't sure he wanted to hear more, but he knew he needed to. Marcus cleared his throat and read from his phone. Dorothy May Jackson was born in Birmingham in 1947. She joined the civil rights movement when she was just 15 years old. She was one of the youngest people to work with the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Dorothy May looked uncomfortable. She didn't like being the center of attention like this. "Young man, you really don't need to read all that." But Marcus kept reading. In 1963, when she was 16, Dorothy May Jackson was arrested for trying to eat lunch at a whites-only restaurant. She spent 3 days in jail. When she got out, she went right back to the restaurant the next day. Judge Williams felt his stomach turn. When Dorothy May was 16, she was braver than most adults. She was fighting for what was right when it was dangerous to do that. In 1965, Marcus continued, Dorothy May Jackson helped organize the Voting Rights March from Selma to Montgomery. She walked the whole 54 miles even when police officers threw tear gas at the marchers. Mrs. Peterson was also reading about Dorothy May on her computer. "Your Honor," she said quietly, "it says here that Mrs. Jackson was beaten by police officers during that march. She had to go to the hospital." Dorothy May touched her arm without thinking about it. Even after all these years, she could still remember how much it hurt when the police officer hit her with his stick. But she also remembered why she kept walking. She kept walking for all the people who couldn't walk, for all the people who were too scared to walk, for all the people who would come after her. Judge Williams was starting to understand how badly he had messed up. "Mrs. Jackson," he said, "I had no idea who you were." Dorothy May looked at him with tired eyes. "Your Honor, that's exactly the problem. You decided who I was before you knew anything about me. You looked at me and saw an old black woman and you decided I wasn't worth listening to." Judge Williams felt like he had been slapped, because that's exactly what he had done. He had looked at Dorothy May and made assumptions about her education, her intelligence, and her importance. And he had been completely wrong. Marcus was still reading from his phone. Mrs. Jackson helped register over 5,000 people to vote between 1965 and 1970. She organized food drives for poor families. She helped start the first free legal clinic for black families in Birmingham. She also, Mrs. Peterson added, reading from her computer, testified before Congress in 1975 about voting rights violations in Alabama. She was personally thanked by President Jimmy Carter for her work. Judge Williams put his head in his hands. This was getting worse and worse. Dorothy May Jackson hadn't just been a civil rights worker. She had been one of the leaders. She had done things that changed history, and he had treated her like she was nothing. Marcus found another article on his phone. "Your Honor, this article is from just last year. It says that Mrs. Jackson still volunteers at the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute. She gives tours to school children and tells them about the civil rights movement." Dorothy May smiled a little when she heard that. Teaching children about history was one of her favorite things to do. She loved seeing their faces when they learned about how things used to be and how people fought to change them. The article also says, Marcus continued, that Mrs. Jackson has written 2 books about her experiences during the civil rights movement. Both books won awards. Judge Williams looked up from his hands. "You've written books?" Dorothy May nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. I wanted to make sure people remembered what happened. I wanted to make sure people understood why it was important." Judge Williams felt sick. He had accused this woman of not understanding the law. But she had written books about fighting for justice. She probably knew more about the law and about rights than he did. Mrs. Peterson found something else on her computer. "Your Honor, it says here that in 2015 President Obama gave Mrs. Jackson the Presidential Medal of Freedom. The article says she was chosen because of her lifetime of work fighting for equality and justice for all Americans." Judge Williams knew about the Presidential Medal of Freedom. It was one of the highest honors that America could give to anyone. It was given to people who had made the country better. People like presidents and scientists and artists and heroes. "Mrs. Jackson," Judge Williams said quietly, "you have the Presidential Medal of Freedom?" Dorothy May nodded. "Yes, Your Honor, it was a great honor. But I didn't do the work for awards. I did it because it was right." Marcus found one more thing on his phone that made him gasp. "Your Honor, this article says that Mrs. Jackson was personally invited to President Obama's inauguration in 2009. She sat in the front row as one of the honored guests." Judge Williams thought about that. Dorothy May Jackson had sat in the front row when America's first black president was sworn in. She had been there to see the country change in a way she had helped make possible. She had watched a moment that her own work had helped create. And Judge Williams had just spent 20 minutes being rude to her, being dismissive of her, treating her like she was unimportant, like she was nobody. Dorothy May could see the distress on Judge Williams's face. Even though he had treated her badly, she felt sorry for him. She knew what it was like to make mistakes. She knew what it was like to feel ashamed. "Your Honor," Dorothy May said gently, "I don't tell people about my past because I don't want special treatment. I want everyone to be treated fairly, not just people who have done famous things." Judge Williams looked at her with wonder. Even now, after everything that had happened, she was trying to make him feel better. She was trying to teach him something instead of just being angry at him. Marcus put his phone away and sat down. He had found enough information. He had made his point. Dorothy May Jackson wasn't just any old woman. She was a hero, a real American hero, and she was standing in a Birmingham courtroom being treated badly by someone who should have known better. Mrs. Peterson printed out some of the articles she had found. "Your Honor," she said, "would you like me to read more about Mrs. Jackson's accomplishments?" Judge Williams shook his head. He had heard enough. He understood now who Dorothy May Jackson was. And he understood what he had done wrong. The courtroom was completely quiet. Everyone was looking at Judge Williams, waiting to see what he would do next. Everyone was thinking about the same thing. How do you apologize for being disrespectful to someone who had risked their life to make your country better? Judge Williams looked at Dorothy Mae Jackson. She was still standing straight, still holding her purse and her cane, still looking at him with dignity, even though he had not shown her any dignity at all. Judge Williams knew that everything was about to change. For him, for the courtroom, and for everyone who had witnessed what just happened. There was no going back from this moment, no pretending it hadn't happened, no making it disappear. The truth was out now. Dorothy Mae Jackson was a hero, and Judge Harrison Williams had treated a hero very badly, in front of witnesses, in a court of law, in the very city where she had fought for justice. Judge Williams sat in his big leather chair, but suddenly it didn't feel comfortable anymore. Nothing felt comfortable. His hands were sweating and his heart was beating fast. He kept looking at Dorothy Mae Jackson, trying to understand how he had made such a terrible mistake. The courtroom was so quiet that Judge Williams could hear the clock on the wall ticking. Everyone was waiting to see what he would do next. Everyone was waiting to see how he would handle the fact that he had just been incredibly rude to one of the most important people in Birmingham's history. Marcus Thompson was still standing in the back row. He had his phone in his hand, and Judge Williams suddenly realized that Marcus might have been recording everything. Other people in the courtroom had their phones out too. Judge Williams felt his stomach drop even more. "Your Honor," Marcus said carefully, "what would you like to do about Mrs. Jackson's case?" Judge Williams looked at Marcus like he was seeing him for the first time. Marcus was a young black law student who had been brave enough to speak up when he saw something wrong happening. Marcus had done what Judge Williams should have done. He had stood up for what was right. Judge Williams looked back at Dorothy Mae. She was still waiting patiently for him to make a decision about her parking ticket. Even after everything that had happened, she was being respectful. She was waiting for the judge to do his job, but Judge Williams didn't know what to do. How do you continue with a simple parking ticket case when you've just learned that the person standing in front of you had dinner with presidents? How do you talk about a $25 fine to someone who had risked her life for freedom? "Mrs. Jackson," Judge Williams said, and his voice came out as a whisper. He cleared his throat and tried again. "Mrs. Jackson, I owe you an apology." Dorothy Mae looked at him with kind eyes. "Your Honor, you don't owe me anything. You just need to do what's right." Judge Williams felt even worse when she said that. She was still being gracious to him, even though he had been awful to her. "Mrs. Jackson, I was wrong. I was very wrong. I should have listened to you from the beginning." "Yes," Dorothy Mae said simply. "You should have." Judge Williams expected her to say more, to forgive him or to make him feel better, but she didn't. She just stood there waiting. Mrs. Peterson cleared her throat softly. "Your Honor, perhaps we should look at Mrs. Jackson's photographs now?" Judge Williams nodded quickly. Yes, of course, Mrs. Jackson, please show me your pictures." Dorothy Mae walked slowly to the judge's bench. She was still moving carefully, still using her cane. Judge Williams watched her and tried to imagine her as a young woman, marching with Dr. King, facing angry police officers, spending nights in jail for fighting for what was right. Dorothy Mae handed Judge Williams her small camera. "Your Honor, if you look at the pictures, you'll see that there was no parking sign where I parked my car." Judge Williams took the camera with shaking hands. He looked at the small screen on the back. The first picture showed Dorothy Mae's car parked on 5th Street in front of the library. Judge Williams could see the street signs clearly. He could see the library in the background, and he could see that there was no parking sign anywhere near her car. Judge Williams looked at the next picture. It showed the same scene from a different angle. Still no parking sign. The date and time on the picture showed Tuesday afternoon at 2:15, 15 minutes before Officer Martinez wrote the ticket. Judge Williams felt his face getting hot. Dorothy Mae had been telling the truth. She had been parked legally. Officer Martinez had made a mistake, and Judge Williams had refused to look at the evidence that would have proved she was right. "Mrs. Jackson," Judge Williams said quietly, "these pictures clearly show that you were parked legally." Dorothy Mae nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. That's what I've been trying to tell you." Judge Williams looked at the pictures again. He thought about how he had refused to look at them earlier. He thought about how he had said he didn't have time for her stories. He thought about how he had treated her like she was lying. Marcus Thompson couldn't stay quiet anymore. Your Honor, Mrs. Jackson was right all along. She was telling the truth and you wouldn't listen to her. Judge Williams looked at Marcus with tired eyes. Yes, Mr. Thompson, you're absolutely right. Mrs. Peterson was watching everything carefully. She had worked in the courthouse for 20 years and she had never seen anything like this. She had never seen a judge realize he was so completely wrong about someone. Your Honor, Mrs. Peterson said, what should we do about the ticket? Judge Williams knew what he had to do. The ticket is dismissed. Completely dismissed. Mrs. Jackson was parked legally. Dorothy May nodded. Thank you, Your Honor. But Judge Williams wasn't finished. He knew that dismissing the ticket wasn't enough. He had done something much worse than just make a mistake about a parking violation. He had treated Dorothy May Jackson with disrespect. He had been rude to her. He had dismissed her because of who he thought she was. Mrs. Jackson, Judge Williams said, dismissing the ticket isn't enough. I need to apologize to you properly. In front of everyone. Dorothy May looked at him carefully. Your Honor, what kind of apology are you thinking about? Judge Williams stood up. He felt like he should be standing when he apologized to her. Mrs. Jackson, I treated you badly today. I was rude to you. I was disrespectful. I made assumptions about you that were completely wrong. I'm sorry. Dorothy May listened to his words. She could tell that he meant them. But she also knew that sorry wasn't always enough. Your Honor, Dorothy May said, I accept your apology. But I want you to understand something. I'm not upset because you were rude to Dorothy May Jackson, the civil rights worker. I'm upset because you were rude to Dorothy May Jackson, the person. Every person who comes to your court deserves better than what you gave me today. Judge Williams felt like she had hit him with a hammer. She was right. Completely right. He hadn't just been rude to a famous person. He had been rude to a human being, and that was wrong no matter who the person was. Marcus Thompson was writing down everything Dorothy May said. He knew these were important words, words that needed to be remembered. Mrs. Jackson, Judge Williams said, you're absolutely right. I should treat every person who comes to my court with respect. I failed to do that today. Dorothy May nodded. Your Honor, I hope you remember this feeling the next time an old person comes to your court. I hope you remember this feeling the next time a poor person comes to your court. I hope you remember this feeling the next time anyone comes to your court asking for fairness. Judge Williams felt tears starting to form in his eyes. He had been a judge for 12 years, and he thought he knew how to do his job. But Dorothy May Jackson was teaching him things about justice that he had never learned in law school. Mrs. Jackson, Judge Williams said, I will remember. I promise I will remember. Dorothy May looked at him for a long moment. Then she picked up her purse and her cane. Your Honor, I hope you keep that promise, because there are a lot of people who need you to be better than you were today. Judge Williams watched as Dorothy May turned to leave. She moved slowly toward the back of the courtroom, using her cane to help her walk. Marcus Thompson stood up as she passed him and nodded respectfully. But Judge Williams knew this wasn't over. He knew that what had happened in his courtroom today would not stay in his courtroom. Too many people had seen it. Too many people had heard it. And in today's world, with everyone having phones and cameras, things like this didn't stay secret for very long. Judge Williams sat back down and put his head in his hands. He had made the biggest mistake of his career, maybe the biggest mistake of his life, and he didn't know how to fix it. Dorothy May Jackson walked slowly out of the courtroom, but she could feel that everything had changed. People in the hallway stopped talking when they saw her. Some of them had been in the courtroom and had heard what happened. Others had heard the story from people who were there. Marcus Thompson caught up with Dorothy May in the hallway outside the courtroom. Mrs. Jackson, he said, are you okay? Dorothy May stopped walking and looked at Marcus with a small smile. I'm fine, young man. Thank you for speaking up in there. That took courage. Marcus felt embarrassed. Mrs. Jackson, you're the one with courage. What happened in there was wrong. Really wrong. Dorothy May nodded. Yes, it was wrong. But wrong things happen every day. The important thing is what people do about it. Marcus pulled out his phone. Mrs. Jackson, I recorded some of what happened. I think people should know about this. Dorothy May looked at the phone, then back at Marcus. What are you going to do with that recording? Marcus wasn't sure. I don't know yet. Maybe I should post it online. Maybe I should send it to the newspapers. People should know how Judge Williams treated you. Dorothy May thought about that for a moment. She had lived through many difficult times. She had seen what happened when stories like this became public. Sometimes it helped make things better. Sometimes it just made people angry. "Young man," Dorothy May said, "before you do anything with that recording, think carefully about why you want to share it. Do you want to help make things better, or do you just want to get Judge Williams in trouble?" Marcus thought about her question. "I want to make things better. I want judges to treat people fairly." Dorothy May smiled. "That's a good reason. But remember, once you put something on the internet, you can't take it back. Make sure you're ready for what might happen next." While Dorothy May and Marcus were talking in the hallway, things were happening inside the courtroom. Judge Williams had canceled the rest of his cases for the day. He told Mrs. Peterson to reschedule everyone. He said he wasn't feeling well. Mrs. Peterson was worried about Judge Williams, but she was also worried about her job. She had seen what happened with Dorothy May Jackson. She knew it was wrong, but Judge Williams was her boss. She didn't know what to do. Judge Williams sat alone in his courtroom after everyone left. He kept thinking about Dorothy May's words. She had said that every person deserved to be treated with respect. She had said that he should remember how he felt today the next time anyone came to his court. Judge Williams thought about all the people he had treated badly over the years. How many times had he been impatient with old people? How many times had he been rude to poor people? How many times had he made assumptions about people based on how they looked? Judge Williams' phone started ringing. It was his supervisor, Chief Judge Margaret Stone. Judge Williams didn't want to answer it, but he knew he had to. "Harrison," Chief Judge Stone said, "I'm getting calls about something that happened in your courtroom today. Something about Dorothy May Jackson. What's going on?" Judge Williams felt his stomach drop. News was already spreading. "Margaret, I made a mistake, a big mistake." "What kind of mistake?" Chief Judge Stone asked. Judge Williams told her everything. He told her how he had treated Dorothy May Jackson. He told her how he had refused to look at her evidence. He told her how he had been rude and disrespectful. He told her that he didn't know Dorothy May was a civil rights hero until it was too late. Chief Judge Stone was quiet for a long time after Judge Williams finished talking. Finally, she said, "Harrison, this is bad. This is really bad." "I know," Judge Williams said. "I apologize to her, but I know that's not enough. Harrison, Dorothy May Jackson is one of the most respected people in Birmingham. She's a legend. If this story gets out, it's going to be a disaster for all of us." Judge Williams knew she was right. The story would make all judges look bad. It would make people lose trust in the court system. It would hurt more than just Judge Williams. While Judge Williams was talking to Chief Judge Stone, Marcus Thompson was in the law school library. He was sitting with his laptop trying to decide what to do with the recording he had made. He had uploaded it to his computer and was watching it again. On the recording, Marcus could clearly hear Judge Williams being rude to Dorothy May. He could hear Judge Williams refusing to look at her pictures. He could hear Judge Williams saying, "You people," in a mean way. It was all there. Marcus also thought about what Dorothy May had said in the hallway. She had asked him to think carefully about why he wanted to share the recording. She had warned him that once something was on the internet, it couldn't be taken back. Marcus decided to call his professor, Dr. Sarah Chen. Dr. Chen taught constitutional law and had worked as a civil rights lawyer before becoming a teacher. Marcus trusted her advice. "Professor Chen," Marcus said when she answered the phone, "I need to talk to you about something that happened today." Marcus told Dr. Chen the whole story. He told her about Dorothy May Jackson and Judge Williams. He told her about the recording he had made. He told her that he didn't know what to do. Dr. Chen listened carefully. When Marcus finished, she said, "Marcus, this is a serious situation. What Judge Williams did was wrong, but you need to be careful about how you handle this." "What do you mean?" Marcus asked. "If you post that recording online, it will probably go viral. It will be on every news channel and every website. Judge Williams will probably lose his job, but Dorothy May Jackson will also be thrust into the spotlight whether she wants it or not." Marcus hadn't thought about that. Do you think I should talk to Mrs. Jackson before I do anything? I think that would be wise, Dr. Chen said. This is her story too. She should have a say in how it's told. Meanwhile, news about what happened was already starting to spread through Birmingham. Mrs. Peterson had told her husband what she witnessed. He told his co-workers. They told their friends. By dinner time, hundreds of people had heard some version of the story. Sarah Williams, a local news reporter, got a call from a friend who worked at the courthouse. The friend told her that something interesting had happened in Judge Williams's courtroom that day, involving Dorothy Mae Jackson. Sarah Williams knew who Dorothy Mae Jackson was. Every reporter in Birmingham knew her story. Dorothy Mae Jackson was local royalty. She was someone the whole city was proud of. Sarah Williams decided to call Dorothy Mae Jackson directly. She wanted to hear the story from Dorothy Mae herself. Dorothy Mae was at home when the phone rang. She was making dinner and thinking about what had happened that day. When she heard that a reporter wanted to talk to her, she wasn't surprised. She had expected this to happen. Mrs. Jackson, Sarah. Williams said, I heard that something happened in court today. Would you be willing to tell me about it? Dorothy Mae thought for a moment. She could refuse to talk to the reporter. She could try to keep the story quiet, but she also knew that wasn't really possible anymore. Too many people had been there. Too many people had seen what happened. Ms. Williams, Dorothy Mae said, what exactly did you hear? Sarah Williams told Dorothy Mae what her friend at the courthouse had said. It wasn't the complete story, but it was enough to show that people were talking. Dorothy Mae made a decision. Ms. Williams, if this story is going to be told, I want it to be told correctly. Can you come to my house tomorrow morning? I'll tell you exactly what happened. Sarah Williams felt excited. Getting an interview with Dorothy Mae Jackson was a big opportunity. Yes, Mrs. Jackson. I'll be there first thing in the morning. After Dorothy Mae hung up the phone, she sat in her kitchen and thought about what was going to happen next. She knew that by tomorrow, everyone in Birmingham would know about Judge Williams and what he had done. By the end of the week, everyone in the country might know. Dorothy Mae thought about Judge Williams. She wondered if he understood how much his life was about to change. She wondered if he was ready for what was coming next. Dorothy Mae also thought about Marcus Thompson, the young law student who had stood up for her. She hoped he would be careful about what he did with his recording. She hoped he would think about the responsibility that came with having that kind of power. Most of all, Dorothy Mae thought about all the other people who went to court every day and didn't get treated fairly. People who didn't have famous names or important histories. People who just wanted justice and respect. She hoped that what happened today would help them somehow. The next morning, Dorothy Mae Jackson sat in her small living room with reporter Sarah Williams. The room was filled with pictures and awards from Dorothy Mae's long life of service. On the walls were photographs of her with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., with presidents, and with thousands of ordinary people whose lives she had touched. Sarah Williams had brought a camera crew, but Dorothy Mae asked them to wait outside. She wanted to tell her story quietly, the same way she had lived most of her life. Mrs. Jackson, Sarah Williams said, can you tell me what happened in Judge Williams's courtroom yesterday? Dorothy Mae told the whole story. She spoke calmly and clearly. She didn't leave anything out, but she also didn't make it sound worse than it was. She just told the truth about what happened. How did it make you feel when Judge Williams treated you that way? Sarah Williams asked. Dorothy Mae was quiet for a moment. It made me feel sad, she said finally. Not angry, just sad. Sad that after all these years, after all the work so many people have done, some things still haven't changed enough. Do you think Judge Williams should lose his job? Dorothy Mae shook her head. That's not for me to decide. But I hope he learns something from this. I hope he becomes a better judge because of what happened. While Dorothy Mae was giving her interview, Judge Williams was meeting with Chief Judge Stone and other court officials. They were trying to figure out how to handle the situation. Harrison, Chief Judge Stone said, I've been getting calls all morning. People want to know what we're going to do about this. Judge Williams looked terrible. He hadn't slept all night. Margaret, I know I messed up. I know this looks bad for everyone. What do you want me to do? I think you need to take some time off, Chief Judge Stone said. Let things cool down a little bit. Judge Williams knew that taking time off was just the beginning. Once Dorothy Mae's interview aired on the news, things would get much worse. At the same time, Marcus Thompson was meeting with Professor Chen at the law school. He had decided not to post his recording online yet. He wanted to wait and see what happened with Dorothy May's interview. "Marcus," Professor Chen said, "you did the right thing by speaking up yesterday, but now you need to think about what comes next." "What do you mean?" Marcus asked. "This story is going to get a lot of attention. People are going to want to interview you. They're going to want to see your recording. You need to be prepared for that." Marcus hadn't thought about being interviewed. He had just been focused on doing what was right. That evening, Sarah Williams' news story aired on television. The story was called "Local Judge Disrespects Civil Rights Hero." It showed Sarah Williams talking to Dorothy Mae Jackson in her living room, with all the pictures and awards visible in the background. Dorothy Mae looked dignified and calm on television. She told her story without being dramatic about it. She explained what happened in simple words that everyone could understand. The story also included information about Dorothy Mae's history. It showed old photographs of her marching with Dr. King. It talked about her arrests and her work registering people to vote. It mentioned her Presidential Medal of Freedom and all her other honors. At the end of the interview, Sarah Williams asked Dorothy Mae what she wanted people to learn from what happened. "I want people to remember that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity," Dorothy Mae said. "Rich or poor, young or old, famous or unknown. When you're in a position of power like a judge, you have a responsibility to treat all people fairly." The news story was shared thousands of times on social media within hours. People were outraged that Judge Williams had treated Dorothy Mae Jackson so badly. Comments poured in from around the country. "How could he not know who she is?" one person wrote. "This is exactly why we still need to fight for civil rights," wrote another. "Dorothy Mae Jackson is a national treasure. Judge Williams should be ashamed," wrote a third. By the next morning, the story had been picked up by national news networks. CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC all ran stories about what happened in Birmingham. The story was trending on Twitter and Facebook. Judge Williams stayed home that day. He couldn't bear to go to the courthouse and face everyone. He spent the day reading the comments online and watching the news coverage. He felt sick about what he had done and what people were saying about him. His phone rang constantly. Reporters wanted to interview him. His friends and family wanted to know if the story was true. His supervisor wanted to discuss his future with the court system. Marcus Thompson was also getting attention. Someone had found out that he was the law student who spoke up for Dorothy Mae. Reporters were calling him too, wanting to hear his side of the story. Marcus decided to do one interview with a local television station. He wanted to support Dorothy Mae and encourage other young people to speak up when they saw injustice. "Mrs. Jackson taught me something important that day," Marcus said during his interview. "She taught me that standing up for what's right is always worth it, even when it's scary." 3 days after the story broke, Judge Williams made a decision. He couldn't continue as a judge knowing that he had lost the trust of the community. He wrote a letter of resignation and sent it to Chief Judge Stone. In his resignation letter, Judge Williams wrote, "I failed to live up to the standards that judges must meet. I treated Mrs. Dorothy Mae Jackson with disrespect, and in doing so I failed the entire community. I am resigning so that someone better can take my place." When news of Judge Williams's resignation broke, Dorothy Mae Jackson was asked to comment. She was in her garden watering her flowers when a reporter called. "Mrs. Jackson, Judge Williams has resigned. How do you feel about that?" Dorothy Mae was quiet for a moment. "I feel sorry for him," she said finally. "I hope he takes this time to learn and grow. I hope he finds a way to use this experience to help other people." The reporter was surprised. "You feel sorry for him? He treated you terribly." "Yes, he did," Dorothy Mae said. "But hating him won't help anyone. I've spent my whole life fighting against hate. I'm not going to start now." Dorothy Mae's gracious response to Judge Williams's resignation made even more news. People were amazed by her kindness and wisdom. She became a symbol of dignity and forgiveness. Letters and emails poured into Dorothy Mae from around the world. People thanked her for her lifetime of service. They thanked her for handling the situation with such grace. They said she was an inspiration to them. Schools started inviting Dorothy Mae to speak to their students. Universities offered her honorary degrees. Organizations wanted to give her more awards. But Dorothy Mae wasn't interested in becoming more famous. She just wanted to continue the work she had always done, helping people, fighting for fairness, teaching young people about the importance of treating everyone with respect. A month after the incident in the courtroom, Dorothy May received a letter. It was from Judge Williams. In the letter, he apologized again for how he had treated her. He told her that he was getting counseling to understand his biases better. He said he was volunteering at a legal aid clinic, helping poor people with their legal problems. He ended the letter by saying, "Mrs. Jackson, you taught me more about justice in one morning than I learned in 12 years as a judge. Thank you for your patience and your grace. I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of your forgiveness." Dorothy May read the letter twice. Then she sat down and wrote a response. She told Judge Williams that she was proud of him for taking responsibility for his actions. She encouraged him to continue working to help others. She reminded him that everyone deserves a second chance to do better. Marcus Thompson graduated from law school 6 months later. At his graduation ceremony, he was given a special award for courage and integrity. In his acceptance speech, he thanked Dorothy May Jackson for teaching him what it really meant to stand up for justice. Dorothy May attended Marcus's graduation ceremony. She sat in the front row, smiling proudly as the young man who had defended her received his law degree. After the ceremony, Marcus came up to Dorothy May. "Mrs. Jackson," he said, "I want you to know that everything I do as a lawyer will be inspired by what you taught me that day in court." Dorothy May smiled and patted Marcus's hand. "Just remember to treat everyone with dignity," she said. "That's the most important law there is." The story of what happened in Judge Williams' courtroom became famous around the country. It was written about in law journals and taught in law schools. It became an example of how unconscious bias could affect the justice system and how important it was for people to speak up when they saw unfairness. But for Dorothy May Jackson, it was just another day in a lifetime of fighting for what was right. She continued to volunteer at the Civil Rights Institute. She continued to help people understand their rights. She continued to teach young people about the importance of equality and justice. And every time someone asked her about that day in court, she would say the same thing. "It wasn't about me. It was about making sure that every person who walks into a courtroom gets treated fairly. That's what justice really means." Years later, when Dorothy May Jackson was 82 years old, she received another honor. The Birmingham courthouse was renamed the Dorothy May Jackson Hall of Justice. On the day of the dedication ceremony,